Okay, well, we made it through Unit 1, and that brings us to our next chapter, which is one of the most critical in our opinion, because it's going to be in everything you do. The skills and the concepts that we're going to move forward with, you have to have a basic understanding of. So, we are moving into equations and inequalities. These skills are going to come back all year to help us in other units. So let's take a look, and we're going to quickly review simple two-step equations. Now, in order to receive credit for this video, and in order to receive credit anytime you do this, you have to show the inverse operation. What does that mean? So you'll see here that this set of notes gives you some steps, and they're referring to this equation. So you can always do what they say. Locate the variable, okay? So in this first one, I locate the variable. It's A. Okay, what I'm wanting to do is isolate. So what you see me writing, what you see me doing, needs to be on your paper to get credit. So my number one goal is to isolate that variable. So if we're looking at number 1, I'm going to try and isolate A, okay? To undo something, we do its inverse, okay? So to undo, we use the inverse. So the inverse of addition is subtraction, and that goes the other way. The inverse of subtraction is addition. Okay, but what we're doing first, so here's how we want you to do this. Your very first step is always locate the variable, okay? These are our steps. We're trying to locate what we're going to isolate, okay? Then what we're going to do is we're going to use inverse to isolate the variable term. Notice the wording I had here. We do this always through addition or subtraction if we're doing this right steps, because this is a two-step equation. So if I take a look, we have my variable term. My variable term is 9a. So I'm going to isolate that. I'm going to get that by itself by doing the inverse of -2. Remember, that's -2. So the inverse of a subtraction is addition. Now, think of this equal sign kind of like a wall. To cross to the other side, I have to do the same thing. The only thing that allows me to move that 2 is its inverse. And if I do it to one side, I must do it to the other. So what does that leave me with? It leaves me with 9a on this side, because a -2 and a +2 is 0. That was the whole point of it, was to get rid of it. Then you have -65 plus 2 is a -63. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have mistakes on integer rules, this is where it's going to come back to really get you. Okay, so it's super important that you understand how to do these. So that's step 2. Well, our step 3 is to use inverse to isolate the variable. Now it's just isolate the variable, not variable terms, but the variable. And I always do this at this step through multiplication or division. Once I've gotten it down to something like this, it will be multiplication or division that gets it done. How do I know what it is? Well, I'm going to take a look here. Look at this 9a. What is being done between the 9 and the a? They're being multiplied. So to undo multiplication, I would divide. What am I going to divide by? Well, you divide by what you're multiplying by. So on this side, I divide by a +9. And on this side, I divide by a +9. Then I'm left with a equals -7. And you box in your answer. Your page right now should look like mine for the most part. If you don't have everything that's here, you're not going to get credit for this video. Okay? let's go look at another example. We're going to kind of jump around this page, and we're going to use the page again in class tomorrow. So do not answer a question if we do not do it in the video. Okay, that's very important to understand. So let's go down to number 6. So find number 6. So my step 1, remember, was to locate the variable. Okay, here's my variable. That means that is my variable term. So to isolate that term, I'm going to take a look. I'm going to draw my little wall because you need to see we're going to move what's on the same side as that term. What am I going to move in this case? I'm going to move that positive one. That one is a positive, so I subtract it. And I subtract that from the other side. So now I have a -6 and a -1. That ends up giving me, let me just change this, a -7. And that's going to equal n divided by -4. Remember, my job now is to make sure that this n stays by itself on one side, that it's completely isolated. So if I take a look here, what's happening between this n and this -4 is division. To undo division, I'm going to multiply. But I'm multiplying by a -4. Since what you're dividing by is negative, what you multiply must be negative. So what that leaves me with is just n on this side. That was the whole point. -4 divided by -4, those cancel each other out, become a 1. The -4 times -7 is a positive 28. How can I check to make sure I'm correct? Well, here's one way. I can replace in the original equation, I can replace my variable with what I solved for. I can then bring things down. I know 28 divided by -4 is a -7. -6 does equal -6. It works. Okay? So I want to quickly touch on another concept. Go look at number 12. Okay? Let's draw our little wall so that we know what we're trying to bring over. Here is my x. Everyone sees where my x is. There's my variable. So it's on the left side, meaning I'm going to bring everything else over to the right. So to do that, I see the variable term is going to stay put for a second. I'm going to bring that -7 over. The inverse of that would be to add it to both sides. I am now left with 2/3 x equals 12. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see this a lot. I am multiplying by a fraction. So everyone says, oh, divide. You're right, but think back to how do we divide fractions? To divide fractions, you remember it was keep, change, flip. So to solve an equation that has a fraction coefficient, what we would do is multiply both sides by the reciprocal. To clear fraction coefficients. Because in dividing fractions, in the process of dividing a fraction, that's what we're doing. So anytime you get to number 12 at this step, what you see written in black, I'm going to multiply this side by 3/2 so that the 3's will cancel, the 2's will cancel. And if I do it on the left, I must do it on the right. Something like this is calculator neutral, meaning you have to know how to multiply fractions. Here's how I do this. I make my whole number a fraction, and I just multiply across. 12 times 3 is 36. 1 times 2 is 2. So I have x equals 36 divided by 2. I can still simplify that so that it's x equals 18. And that is the value of x. Okay? So let's just touch on, it's still a two-step equation, except it looks a little different because they're kind of all grouped together. So there's two ways to solve this. I'm going to show you both ways. The first way allows you to do this anytime you have a proportion equation. What I can do is I can rewrite this equation as x minus 1 over 6 equals 2 over 1. I like this way. I think this way is easy. I cross multiply. So what I'm doing is I'm doing 1 times x minus 1 equals, and I'll switch colors so you see what we're multiplying by, 6 times 2, okay, which is 12. So if I go through and I do my distributing, and it should really always be by 1, I'd get x minus 1 equals 12. Remember, 1 times x, 1 times negative x. So I'm going to come up here to solve it. Now it's a simple one-step equation. I add 1 to both sides so that x equals 13. That's one way to do it. Okay? Let's go look at number 16 and I'll show you another way. So what we have to realize is this m plus 17, that's all one thing right now. That's on top of the numerator. I can't move that 17 until I've gotten the denominator gone, okay? So what can I do? Well, I'm dividing here by a negative 2. So if I multiply by a negative 2, I then get negative 18 equals m plus 17. Now it just becomes isolate the variable. I subtract 17 from both sides so that m equals. And notice, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not writing that line to show the two sides. If you need it, you write it. But two negatives with adding, I'm adding those really. I'm grouping them together. I end up getting negative 35. So ladies and gentlemen, this is all we want done on your notes. There's two problems at the bottom, problem in the middle with notes on the side, and then two problems on the front page. That's it, nothing more. Leave it at that. If you have any questions, you can ask.